Hello and welcome to our game with myself, Shane Stapleton, Michael Verney joining me as ever. We're live. The first 15 minutes are going to be live on Twitter, and after that, you're going to have to follow us on patreon.com/our game. If you're watching on Twitter now, you can see with the tweet we put out. The link is there. €5 a month works out at about 50 cents a show over the course of the year. So it's for absolute nothing. And for those of you who've joined us on Patreon, you'll get the full show here today. Michael Verney, how are things with you?
Good. This is like the kickoff show before the pay-per-view. It's like watching an old wrestling pay-per-view back in the day. Have an hour beforehand, get you buttered up and ready to go, and then bam, you're in for the pay-per-view.
You can be sure of it. Shane Power joins us this afternoon, lads. Hope you're well. Finally get to see the Thursday show live for the first time in a long time since I'm not in college today. Well, hopefully you're not off sick, or if you are, that there's very little wrong with you. Michael Verney, we have a huge amount of games on this weekend. So much to talk about. We have a clip from Padraic Maher's retirement interview coming up just shortly. John Evans, former Roscommon and Wicklow manager, he's going to join us a little bit later on to talk about the Tommy Conroy injury, to talk about Kerry against Dublin this weekend. We also have Brian Byrne of Naas. They've got a big All-Ireland final coming this weekend against Kilmoyley. We've got lots going on today, so make sure you do click on via Patreon if you want to see the full show. I suppose there's no point in delaying any longer. I mean, I spoke with Padraic Maher just a short while ago. Here's a little clip of him talking about the reasons and, speaking to the doctors and what it was that eventually made him decide that he had to retire from hurling.
Yeah, but sure, again, the list was very eye-opening. He really listed off of what damage could be like if you're putting yourself, especially when you're working in the head neck area. You could end up, the way he was pushing me is, do you want your girlfriend lifting you off the couch and putting you to bed every night? That extreme, that kind of way. So when he started talking like that, it was like, this is a fairly black and white decision for me anyway. So, but look, thankfully, as I said to Andy earlier on, the risk has been taken away now, please God, and with the guidance from the medics going forward, I'll hopefully have a perfectly healthy life to live.
Yeah, so to be fair, the details of what he's been going through, and obviously he's more specialist to speak to. It was a wide-ranging interview for about 50 minutes. There's more of that on ourgame.ie, on the YouTube site there at the moment. He couldn't quite figure out when exactly that it all happened. It wasn't a case of taking one big hit. It sort of progressively came on him, the symptoms, around county final time. He'd been brilliant in the county semi-final against Kildangan. Middle of November then, he started to get symptoms, got scans done. It was supposed to be a routine check and just, a bit of a shock. So, I speak to him about plenty of that. The interview is on the site. But were you shocked when you saw it? This is a lad who's 32, just about to turn 33.
Yeah, it's scary. It's scary to hear him talk about it there. And yeah, I think of any player to ever retire, it is one of the biggest shocks because Padraic Maher was just Mr. Ever Present for Tipperary. He was always there. I think he spent the guts of an hour of championship hurling since he made his debut on the sideline. And that was, I think the vast majority of that was against Limerick in, was it 2020 or 21 when he had to go off injured, and was subbed off a couple of times late in matches, generally when the match was over. He's always been there and he's always been a rock for them in defence. He's always just been a powerhouse of a defender. I said it a couple of years ago, I don't think there's ever been a stronger hurler than him. And there's two reasons for it. I think he has serious natural strength, as in he had so much strength even burst on the scene, but he had the gym strength as well. I think he had the perfect mix of that raw doggedness, just a bull of a lad, even if he never went to a gym, and then he honed it. And there's clips going around the last few days, the one where Guzzy O'Connell throws up the ball around the sideline, Padraic Maher blocks it down, and the hurl is actually broken just around off his neck, and I had to watch it 4 or 5 times until they could actually see it's that quick, and he never flinches one bit. There's another clip where I think it's Richie Hogan and I'm not too sure who else it is. They have him out in the sideline, and any other player, he's driven into the first row. Any other player, and he manages to somehow use his upper body to evade them and get through. Just the big catches. I can remember catching a ball over Wally definitely in the 19 final, possibly in the 16 final as well. That's just Padraic Maher, kind of defiant and very difficult one for him. Very difficult one for Tip and for any hurling supporters. But particularly for Tip for this year, they have lost an absolute monster of a leader from their dressing room. But first and foremost, from his point of view, that, putting his health first and foremost, because he just, as he says there, you're just taking any risk out of your hands. You're not just putting it out there. You're taking the risk out of your hands, and hopefully he'll, be able to live a happy and healthy life. But he's some lost to Tip, and he's some lost to Sarsfield as well, because the way he kept himself, he would be hurling senior for Sars until he's 40.
Joe Butler, who's commenting on Patreon, says Padraic Maher was a powerful player for Tip. He was a great leader for the team and learned to control his aggression after the 2012 semi-final. He had power, skill, and a very strong player. I mean, it was so vivid when he mentioned that thing about doctors suggesting to him of his girlfriend, lifting him into bed. I mean, when it's put to you like that, there probably is no more decision to be made. And I mean, Brendan Maher has also retired over the winter, but at least he'll be able to continue playing with the club. So it's tough when you're just told more or less like, stop, and that's kind of it. And, he was talking a little bit more about, would it affect your work life or whatever? And he was like, no, because, you play, well, certainly not up to this point. He hasn't heard that to that effect, that he should be absolutely fine because he's stopping now at this point. But like in training, and you can imagine the intensity of inter-county training sessions, you're taking 10, 15 hits per every training session. And, that's not going to work great for your neck in the long term if you get some very bad hits there. But sure, what can you say? Only it's terrible for the guy. Hopefully he finds other things to fill the time, and people are kind of gathering in around him, because that must be just very tough when you've been in that bubble for so long, as he's been talking about.
Padraic Maher was kind of not the same kind of like Philly McMahon type character, but he was a type of character that you loved having him in your team. I'd imagine from your point of view, being a Tip supporter, like when you see Padraic Maher in defence, you kind of think anything is possible. You always kind of think you have a chance. And he's a player that maybe rival counties wouldn't have particularly liked, because he was, a lot of time he gave it the big one, and he got the Tip support up. And when he made a catch, that was like someone scoring 2 points up the far end. So to have him on your side must have been massive. I'll tell you a quick one about Padraic Maher. Actually, would you believe this now? I actually scored 3 points off him one day.
Go away.
I marked in midfield in 2009 in Shinrone were opening a stand, and I got 3 points off midfield. Now, fair enough, he got 4 points off me, but still I scored 3 points off him.
You must have been up at the 14 every time you were shooting, because I can't imagine you driving him over from 70 yards. I put
one over from the middle of the field off my hurl. Would you believe that? And we've been beaten by that much at the time. I don't even think people clapped, and it definitely deserved a standing ovation, because I've never done anything like that before or after. I'm going to have to get Paddy back on the line here and ask him, did this happen? No doubt he remembers playing against you just as well as you remember the other way around. It's funny because in 2009, he was out around the middle of the field. This was going to say, March, April, something like that. Or, I'm not 100% certain, actually. But he ended up full back in 2009, getting an All-Star in 2009. And didn't he end up... am I right in saying he ended up centre forward in a challenge game in 2010? Yeah, so after the Cork defeat, and how heavy that defeat was, the management decided that they wanted to see what he'd be like as a ball winner in the forward line, so they put him up centre forward. Didn't work out great. Obviously, he had an unbelievable season at wing back thereafter, but he was playing centre forward in a challenge match against Waterford. Where does he rank? Like 6-time All-Star. Obviously, Tommy has 9. JJ has a fair bag full of them and a hurler of the year as well. But he's in around that kind of territory, maybe just below those two, but higher than nearly everybody else. You're asking a Tipperary man here, so you're putting me on the spot, and everyone knows that Kilkenny era won more stuff. So if I said, but he's as good at this, that, and the other, you'll say, but sure, the medals aren't to the same level. He has 3 All-Irelands, whereas some of these lads have 7, 8, and 9. But if I'm to talk about Tipperary, has a better back ever lined out for Tipperary? And I would say off the top of my head, there's a lot of good backs that have played over the years, but I think you'd struggle to name a better one. Oh, I think you would. And I think it was very interesting to hear. I think Colin Bonner's shock and his empathy towards him really came out in his words on Tuesday afternoon. And he basically said that no defender on their team in the 1990s would even lay a glove on him. And he said he would basically walk onto that team. And I think he'd walk on to any team, really. And he'd be remembered so fondly. And I suppose the one good thing about it is, while injury is forcing him out, at least it's not an injury where he's, incapacitated in some way. At least he is walking away kind of fit and healthy, and he's able to, hopefully, I'm sure he'll go into coaching. I'm sure he'll probably get involved with Durdas Og, or so he'll be in demand anyway in many different spheres.
You can be sure of it. Shane Power with another comment. Though Daisha man still in shock at Paddy having to retire, Tip will miss him so unbelievably much, and it'll be so strange to not see him on the pitch for either club or county anymore. Absolutely. A Sully 180. Verney off the hurl from midfield. Yep, slitters are too light.
That was in 09 actually, but yeah, I don't disagree. But sometimes when you just catch the ball and catch it right on the money, and it can go as far. Well, it happened to me. I think it happened to me once, and probably that day. But when it happens, it just goes an extra 10 or 15. But Paddy was so versatile, really, as well. You could have probably played him on a given day anywhere between probably 2 and 9. He could definitely play. You could easily see him scoring 4 or 5 from the middle of the field as well.
Yeah, yesterday on Tipcast, which you can catch on the Nina Guardian site there, myself and Shane Brophy, we were kind of looking at what our Tipperary team would be for this coming year. Now, when the league is over, you might see certain lads step up and all that, and I might completely go back in my team. But I'm going to bring it up on screen here as I did yesterday, and just let you have a look here and see, how do you think this Tip backline might line up this year? Because there'd be no Paddy Maher, there'd be no Brendan Maher. So having a look here, so my back line has Cathal Barrett, Ronan Maher, Seamus Kennedy in the full back line, with Kennedy probably following the Roman forward, Brian McGrath, Paddy Cadell and Barry Heffernan. Now, obviously, the midfield and the 2 wing forwards will kind of clog the middle a little bit, whereas Shane's back line is Cathal Barrett, Owen Connolly, Craig Morgan, Seamus Kennedy, Ronan Maher, Brian McGrath. What would your thoughts be on those two? I'll leave it up for a couple of more seconds.
Yeah, I think yours is probably the more likely. I'd imagine Ronan Maher would end up back in full back. I think Seamus Kennedy is big and mobile and quick and can follow anybody out the pitch. That probably makes sense. Paddy Cadell, centre back, I'm not so sure. Just because of, he hasn't maybe played as much as I would have liked, just from looking at him over the last couple of years. So maybe it would be a big departure putting him at centre back. I can see what Shane has done, or what Shane Brophy has done there, but he's tried to find a kind of a full back to release Ronan Maher. The defences aren't bad on paper now. It's just probably, I don't know, like Seamus Kennedy's probably not going to go in full back again, I wouldn't think. Could he potentially play centre back?
Seamus Kennedy?
Yeah.
Well, he looked like he was going to there last year. I remember in the league game he was playing there, and I was thinking, great, because he's such pace, he can cover him behind. But Owen Breslan, who was also on the show, he was talking about maybe Seamus Kennedy as a straight-up fullback, because he does have that pace, and physically, you could imagine he'd match up pretty okay with anyone, good in the air. He's very quick across the turf. And I can see merit in that too, but to me, there are options there, and Tip should be able to sort of. I'm not saying you'd ever find someone who can fully fill the gap left by Paddy Maher. Obviously not, if he's Tip's greatest ever defender. But there are options for Tipperary to not feel too down and out about things there.
No, there are plenty of options. I suppose, apart from probably Cathal Barrett at number 2 and Ronan Maher somewhere else, having Paddy at 7 or having Paddy at 3. You always knew he was there, particularly at 7. He was just there and he was on the team, and you were filling 5 slots around him. Whereas his absence does leave a big gap. Does leave a gap in the defence. There are plenty of good players there to fill that gap, but maybe it's even, his leadership on the pitch, his leadership off the pitch. I remember just hearing Lara Corbett there talk a few days ago about he didn't say too much in the dressing room. He wasn't one for big long speeches, but he might give 20 or 30 seconds. And it'd be strong, and it'd be from the hip, and it'd be to the point. So there's a lot of leadership gone from that dressing room in him and Brendan Maher now. And I think that's maybe, and a new manager coming in as well. So there's a lack of continuity there. That's probably going to be one of Tip's biggest problems going into this year.
Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit more about Tipperary in a short while. We're also going to have a crossbar challenge that I did with Eddie Brennan the other day. We're going to have a clip of Owen Breslan. But if you're watching on Twitter at the moment, you'll have to switch over to Patreon. The link is just there, patreon.com/ourgame. So it's a simple one to just type in if you forget the link there. So the rest of the show will be on Patreon now. So we'll say goodbye to our Twitter viewers and continue on now with our league preview.